The studio lights burned hot as Denzel Washington took his seat across from Jon Stewart, the applause rolling through the room in a practiced swell before settling into an expectant hush. Denzel acknowledged the crowd with a small wave and a calm smile, the kind that came from decades of premieres, interviews, and moments under scrutiny. He adjusted himself in the chair, posture relaxed but grounded, as if anchoring himself before stepping into unpredictable waters. Across from him, Jon Stewart shuffled his cards, grinning, already leaning into the rhythm of late-night familiarity. Jon opened with humor, a light monologue riff about Hollywood legends and the strange times they lived in. The audience laughed easily, and Denzel laughed too, nodding along, offering quick, thoughtful responses about storytelling, discipline, and the responsibility of playing characters larger than life. For a few minutes, it felt like a standard exchange, warm, witty, respectful. The band punctuated jokes, the cameras glided smoothly, and producers relaxed behind the glass. Then the questions shifted. Jon tilted his head, tone still casual, but the words grew sharper. He steered the conversation toward politics, cultural pressure, and the expectation that public figures should take stands, whether they wanted to or not. Denzel listened closely, fingers interlaced, eyes never leaving Jon's face. When he responded, his voice was calm and deliberate. He spoke about nuance, about the danger of simplifying complex realities into applause-ready statements. The audience quieted, sensing the shift. Jon pushed back with a familiar smirk, reframing Denzel's words with irony and satire. He suggested that silence itself could be interpreted as a stance. A few audience members clapped. Denzel's smile faded, replaced by something more serious, not anger, but resolve. He leaned forward slightly and explained that choosing when and how to speak was not cowardice but discipline. He talked about wisdom earned over time, about listening before reacting, about not turning lived experience into entertainment. The exchange tightened. Jon interrupted once, then twice, trying to keep the pace brisk, the tone lively. Denzel raised a hand, not aggressively, just enough to reclaim the floor. His voice dropped, steady and resonant, filling the studio without effort. He spoke about respect, about conversations becoming traps when they were designed to provoke rather than understand. The room grew still. Even the band members watched closely, instruments idle. Jon attempted to diffuse the tension with a joke, something self-aware, something that usually worked. This time it didn't land. The laughter came late and thin. Denzel paused, letting the silence stretch. When he spoke again, there was no performance in his words, only conviction. He said he had agreed to a conversation, not an ambush dressed up as comedy. A murmur rippled through the audience. Somewhere off camera, a producer shifted uneasily. Jon's expression hardened just slightly. He challenged Denzel, asking whether discomfort wasn't necessary for growth, whether being questioned so directly wasn't part of the deal when you stepped onto a public stage. The word, deal, lingered in the air, heavy and transactional. Denzel exhaled slowly. His jaw tightened, not from fury, but from disappointment. He responded that discomfort should lead to understanding, not spectacle, and that there was a difference between hard questions and manufactured confrontation. The tension became undeniable. Cameras zoomed closer. Social media managers backstage hovered over screens, sensing a moment spiraling beyond control. Denzel straightened in his chair and glanced briefly toward the audience, faces a mix of awe and unease. He nodded, once, as if deciding something internally. Then, with calm precision, he stood. The movement startled the room. Applause erupted, confused, fragmented, unsure whether it was support or shock. Denzel thanked the audience sincerely, voice warm despite everything. He turned to Jon, offered a brief nod, respectful, final, and said he was done. Jon opened his mouth to respond, but the words never came. As Denzel walked toward the edge of the stage, the band remained silent, the lights glaring brighter than ever. The camera held for a beat too long before cutting away, capturing the moment when a conversation crossed a line and could not be pulled back. Behind the curtain, the roar of the studio dissolved into a dull, echoing quiet. The sharp brightness of the lights gave way to the softer glow of hallway fluorescence, and for the first time in minutes, Denzel Washington allowed himself a full breath. He didn't rush. He didn't look back. Each step down the narrow corridor felt deliberate, grounded, as if he were leaving not just a set, but a version of the conversation he refused to participate in. A production assistant hurried toward him, eyes wide, whispering apologies and assurances that the segment had gone off the rails. Denzel stopped briefly, placing a reassuring hand on the assistant's shoulder. He told them it wasn't personal. It was principle. He thanked them for their work and continued on, ignoring the muffled chaos still buzzing behind the stage doors. In his mind, the argument replayed not as a fight, but as a crossroads where intention and outcome no longer aligned. Back on set, Jon Stewart stood frozen for a moment, cards limp in his hand. The audience, unsure of their role now, clapped sporadically before falling into an awkward silence. Jon cleared his throat, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He leaned into the camera, acknowledging the moment with unexpected seriousness. He spoke about live television, about honest disagreement, about how sometimes conversations don't land the way you expect. The words were careful, measured, and unusually subdued. As the show cut to break, producers swarmed Jon, voices overlapping in rapid-fire assessments, damage control, messaging, timing. Jon listened, nodding slowly, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He replayed Denzel's words in his head, recognizing the shift from playful tension to something deeper, something he may have underestimated. For years, confrontation had been the currency of comedy. Tonight, it had demanded a cost. Outside, Denzel stepped into the cool night air. The city hummed with indifference, taxis sliding past, pedestrians unaware that a moment of televised friction was already being sliced into clips and captions. He got into his car, closing the door with a quiet finality. As the driver pulled away, his phone buzzed endlessly on the seat beside him, messages from friends, publicists, colleagues. He didn't check them, not yet. He stared out the window, watching the reflections of streetlights stretch and vanish. Within minutes, the internet ignited. Headlines raced each other, some declaring Denzel kicked off the show, others praising him for walking away with dignity. Short clips looped endlessly, stripped of context, amplified by outrage and applause in equal measure. Commentators chose sides instantly. Some accused him of being overly sensitive. Others called his exit a masterclass in self-respect. The argument multiplied, feeding itself. Hours later, in a quiet hotel room, Denzel finally scrolled through the noise. He read a few messages from actors he respected, from young creatives thanking him for standing firm. One message in particular made him pause. Someone wrote that watching him walk away felt like permission to say no in a world that rewards provocation. He set the phone down and allowed himself a small, reflective smile. The following morning, Jon Stewart addressed the incident more directly. In a monologue stripped of jokes, he admitted the conversation had crossed into territory neither of them anticipated. He spoke about the challenge of balancing satire with sincerity, about how lines could blur when the goal was always to push. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't a dismissal either. It was acknowledgement. Denzel, meanwhile, returned to his routine. A workout, a script read-through, a quiet lunch with someone who knew him beyond the headlines. When asked about the incident later that day, he kept his response brief. He said conversations mattered, but respect mattered more. He said walking away was sometimes the strongest statement you could make. Then he moved on. Weeks later, the moment still lingered in public memory, cited in think pieces and debates about media culture. But for Denzel, it faded into the background, another chapter in a career defined not by noise, but by intention. He hadn't been kicked off a show in his mind. He had chosen his exit when the conversation stopped being honest, and that choice, quiet and resolute, said everything he needed it to say.